environmental impact report. After the new master plan is approved, staff will begin application for FAA funding. This concludes our presentation, and we are available for questions.
I have a question, and I know you're trying to keep all existing aircraft on this airfield, but I think this is a big, huge commercial driver here, and I think we're planning an airport for, if not 50 years, maybe 100. So I'm a private pilot. I'm sympathetic to airplane owners, but I think the folks that are tied down on the north side of the runway need to move to Fallbrook or someplace else. You have a huge commercial operations going here with a lot of corporate jets coming in and out of there. This is the driver. This is the impetus for us lengthening the runway and doing all these safety issues there. It's no longer a little small airport that you get to fly in and out of with your Cessna 210. So I think those folks need to be put on notice that they're going to have to move, because you're going to have that space, and you're not going to be able to move them to the fixed base operator space. I mean, you're cutting back on their businesses. So the purpose of this whole thing was to examine the economic feasibility of expanding and increasing the activity. I think the concerns of the public, as you have these meetings, of course, are going to be noise. But if we expand the runway, that noise will be a lot lessened, because that footprint will go way down. And so I know your alternatives here are, you're basically looking at the 800 foot. I would like you to also, because I'm concerned about if I want you to also leave the 900 foot in your study. Is that, yeah, because I don't want to have to come back and sit down and decided we got the money from the feds to build 900 feet, and then all of a sudden we haven't studied it. So I don't want to have to go through that again. So I realize you're preferred, and we're going to probably approve the going ahead with your preferred, but I just want to make sure we haven't eliminated the 900 foot and a couple of other issues. I know you guys are nice to the pilots, and I appreciate that. I don't want them down here picketing us, but at the same time, as a private pilot, I think maybe we ought to move some of these planes, or make an opportunity for them to move them to Fallbrook or Borrego, or I know French Valley's in Riverside County, and they would probably like the aircraft also. I just think the days of the majority of this activity being recreational are over. And so this is a very, very viable commercial operation. So we're planning for the next 50 years, if not 100. So I want us to keep all the options available. With that being said, we can go to speakers or staff or whatever. I just don't want to narrow this down to a focus group's input, because I don't know what their concern is. My concern is the economic viability of this airport in the northern region. And very obviously, if you look at Lindbergh, you know, they're pretty much at capacity. I know Greg can talk to us about that, but I think we have a great option here, and I think we ought to use it. So with that said, having ruined the whole soup mix, you go ahead. What do you want?
Chairman Horn, members of the board, if I could just ask Mr. Drinkwater to provide some clarification as it relates to the 900 feet, because I want to make sure we're managing the expectations of what the future analysis as far as CEQA is concerned. And Leanne, if you would like to weigh in as well, that would be terrific.
So for the C and D3 runway extension, the limitation had to do with safety area and property. And in order to have the appropriate amount of safety area, if you go to 900 feet, you're pushing it out into the Camino Real Street. Now, what hasn't maybe been fully analyzed, and I'll defer to my consultant sitting next to me, Mr. Vince Horrigan from Kimley Horn, is whether there may be something greater than 800 but less than 900 that still could be fit. Maybe 850, maybe 870, and maybe you could comment.
Well, let me mention the El Camino Real. I'm sure you've all been to LAX. You notice the runway goes over the roads, so there's no reason not to extend the table you're going to build to go to the landfill across the roadway El Camino Real, because we own the property on the other side of that road also. So there's no reason why we couldn't consider that. I just think as you're designing this thing, you got to think out of the box. And by the way, I'm not related to the Horn Consulting Group. Right. And I'm not an architect, so we'll leave that runway part to Ron. But I just want you to make sure that we think out of the box when we're doing this, because we are really planning a huge asset. We have a lot of acres here, and we have an opportunity, I think, to make it into a rising star. I think we should do that. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. You're on the airplanes. You know how I feel about airplanes.
Yes, sir. The issue with LAX and crossing the roads, that was built 75 years ago with the runway extension Sepulveda going under the runways about 50 years ago. Since that time, standards have changed. In fact, in 2012, the new standards for the runway safety area, which you cannot have anything, including Sepulveda, inside it, though it is, has changed. It takes a waiver to that standard. So building a bridge for a runway over El Camino Real would be extremely challenging getting it approved through the FAA.
Well, it's just the part that would be over El Camino, it's just the approach apron, right? It wouldn't be the runway.
All parts of the runway safety area, which for CD3 extends 1,000 feet beyond the runway surface. So before the runway surface is 1,000 feet of additional space.
All right. I'll get an exemption. All right.